Hey, good morning and welcome to Breakthrough Walls. I'm Ken Walls and I'm your host. And today I have a very special guest joining us from Costa Rica, which is where she lives, I can't wait to talk about that. But her name is Teresa. I'm not going to attempt her last name because, well, you'll understand in a minute. So I'll have her tell us her last name. So you guys stay with us. Do me a favor and share this out to all of your friends. This is going to be an incredible time today. So stay with us. We'll be right back. And we are back. Let me bring Teresa on. Teresa, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Ken. Thanks so much for having me.
I said I can't. If my wife was interviewing you, you'd be in luck because she could pronounce it.
It's pronounced the French way. It's de Grosbois. Yeah.
De Grosbois.
You got it. Perfect.
Oh, goodness.
But I'm so used to people mispronouncing it, I really don't care.
Yeah. So, Teresa, I started this about 4 years, little over 4 years ago. And my goodness, I can't even believe I'm saying that. It's been over 4 years. And, I started this to help people have a breakthrough in life, to get unstuck, if you would. And probably for selfish reasons, because I was stuck at the time. And I'm like, maybe if I listen to enough people talk about how they got unstuck, I'll figure it out. And it worked. So, I'd like to start with you kind of giving a background, like where were you born and raised?
Yeah, I love what you just said, because it's like, yeah, the reason I became an expert on influence was because I had so little of it growing up.
Right. Yeah.
I think we always lean toward the thing we most need or most want, right?
Yeah.
I'm actually Canadian by birth. I grew up in northern Canada, so I'm a backwoods girl. We actually used to spend our summers in a remote backwoods cabin. We'd go in by boat every year, actually, in the summer, just time to see the hatching of the little baby mosquitoes.
Wow.
That's northern Canadian humor.
Baby mosquitoes? Is that what you said? Oh my gosh.
But it was fun. My family became my whole world at a very early age because we were so remote. Yeah.
Wow. So northern Canada, that's like up by the North Pole, isn't it?
I'm going to the dark area, really, but yeah.
Yeah. It gets cold up there.
It does. Yeah. Some fairly brutal winters. Hence,
Sure.
once I finally got to a point of complete freedom in my life, I decided to move to Costa Rica because I was done with winter.
You're like, there is no gray area in my life. It's black or white, period.
Yeah.
So, and because Costa Rica is the exact opposite of northern Canada.
Pretty much.
So you grew up. Now, I'm assuming you went to school there and high school and all that. Did you go to college?
I did. I went to college in a city called Sudbury. Did an undergrad in biology, and then ended up out west for graduate school.
Wow.
In Alberta in the Canadian prairies. So.
Wow. Okay. So you got a master's degree too?
I do. Yeah. Wow. And but ironically, I ended up leaning into fields and disciplines that had very little to do with my university education, and from what I hear, that happens to a lot of people, right? Your university launches you into a career, and then your career takes you in a completely opposite direction. So,
yeah.
A lot of what I learned about influence and how to create change in the world, I learned after college, on the ground, doing big change initiatives in industry.
Do you see what Jay Fox says there? You don't have to shovel heat in Costa Rica.
I love that. Yes, Jay, I'm totally with you on that, yeah.
Oh, there's my wife. She speaks fluent French. You guys could have a conversation about your last name.
Bienvenue.
So you grew up and you went to college in Canada, and it was biology. That's like
Yeah,
my
actually,
nemesis. Like,
my undergraduate was in biology, my graduate degree was in physical geography, so I did a lot of work on meteorology and, which later came into play when I decided to start founding a conscious, sustainable community here in Costa Rica, but had
wow.
very little bearing on my career in between, so it's kind
Yeah.
of ironic. Yeah.
So where did you go after college? I mean, after you got through the master's degree, I mean, where did you stay in Canada? I
I
always
did.
have to throw in an A when I'm talking to my
Yeah.
Canadian friends.
Eh? It's a whole sentence in Canada, eh?
Uh,
Hey.
and there's always a question mark there. It's like,
Yeah, yeah. It's usually a question. Sometimes it's just an exclamation. But yeah, so after college, I ended up working in the oil and gas industry out west, right? And
okay.
I quickly went from working in environment and environmental impact assessment to working in environmental management systems, which just took me into management systems, and then that just takes you into business expertise and how to create change both within organizations and within whole industries.
Okay.
And I think through that journey, I just became utterly fascinated with how do you create change, especially in an environment of resistance, like that you won't find a more old boys culture than the oil and gas industry in Canada. And, so there is a lot of resistance to new thinking, a lot of resistance to change. So that really had me studying, how do you create word of mouth epidemics, either within your own company or even, within an industry as a whole. And I just became fascinated with it and started mentoring under anyone I could find that could teach me about how do you get people enrolled in a new idea and a new way of thinking, and how do you get them to take action around it?
I mean, that could be on a global scale or down
Mm.
to a family level scale, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
so what, like, you're in the oil and gas business and you're trying to figure out how to create influence in that business. Wow,
Yeah.
that's
Mind-boggling,
interesting.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm
And yet
sitting
we
here going,
succeeded on a
wow.
number of fronts, one of my
Yeah.
earliest mentors who I think really understood influence well, used to say, "You just gotta push the rope in the middle. Eventually, the ends will follow." And by that, he meant you
Wow.
find people who align with your thinking and create energy around what you're doing and create a core movement. And then when there's enough energy and enough excitement and enough attention around that core group, the others will start coming in. Malcolm Gladwell talks about that so nicely in his book, The Tipping Point,
Yep.
how if the innovators can get the early adopters on board, which is usually about 15% penetration,
Yep.
then it's inevitable that the rest will eventually follow. That's the tipping point. It's usually around 15%, right? And so, we take that theory, whether you're talking in a tiny little environment like a family or a community or an organization, or whether you're talking globally, like
Yeah.
the Evolutionary Business Council that I now run, we're taking that concept globally. We're like, if we could bring consciousness as a way of being, like being aware of our own thoughts and how much they sabotage ourselves, if we can bring that to 15% of the global population, would the rest of the globe eventually follow? So we've actually made that part of our mission to support entrepreneurs who stand for teaching consciousness inside their work so that we can create a global epidemic of I always think we need to find a better word now post COVID.
Yeah, no kidding. Like,
We can really spread that out globally, from an inevitability standpoint if we can get 15% on board.
it's funny. I was talking to my wife about um something similar because there are people like Russell Brunson, who's the founder of ClickFunnels, and I'm friends with Grant Cardone, people like Grant and
Mhm.
Tony Robbins, and all of these amazing people who have created exactly what you're talking about. And I
Yeah.
call it a movement. Like
Yes.
it's a
Yeah.
movement. Like they create
Yeah.
almost like a cult following. And
Mhm.
is that kind of what you're talking about?
Really, yeah, and, like, when a movement becomes more than a movement, when
Yeah.
it starts to become adopted globally,
Mm,
like a movement is what you have in the first 15%,
sure.
like,
Yep.
when
Yep.
when you're just getting the first 15 and you've got your, as you say, push the rope in the middle, right?
Hmm.
When you've got those first few people, those first early adopters, and there's people starting to shout it from the rooftops, right? And then when it gets past that 15%, now you're moving into an adoption curve, and it simply becomes a new way of being, a new way of thinking. Like cell phones went through that, right? You
Yep.
remember the first picture phones actually came out in like I think it was 1990, something like that.
I
And
sold them.
and
I sold
and
them.
everybody was like, "Ugh, like what if they phone me and I don't have my makeup on?" Like there was all kinds of disinformation around picture phones and people were really uncomfortable. And then about I think it was about 15 years later, it had percolated long enough
Yep.
that iPhones started to come out, and then the adoption curve, once they got past those early adopters, and it was like all the cool kids have a picture phone, then it was like probably as a matter of 2 to 3 years before the whole world went over to the new technology. So the early days are often kind of like slow, 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 boom,
Yep.
And we often see that in influence theory, right? In communication theory. So it's really cool to watch how things go down.
I mean, I don't know if you even realize this, but this is what I teach. This
Yeah,
exactly. I have an online academy teaching this called the
yeah,
Grow Live Academy. And I
yeah.
teach people how to build influence online through live streaming and creating a show and a podcast.
Mm,
And what's interesting is I had Grant on Cardone on after he filmed Undercover Billionaire, and I said, dude, what do you think that entrepreneurs could really, what's the number one thing they could learn right now? And he's
yeah,
like, this, what you're doing right here. He goes, but man, it's hard in the beginning when you only have two people watching. And
yeah,
it's so true. And it's true with anything. Like you have to I'm going to ask you, like, what do you think, like, because when you first get started trying to create a movement or influence or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
especially if it's something new like you were just
yes,
talking about,
yeah.
how do you get through how does somebody get through the initial stages where you're like, this sucks, everybody hates me, what I'm trying to do is never going to work, why am I even doing this? Right?
Yeah,
All of the voices, how do you get through that?
yeah. Well, and I love that question, and I know you already know the answer. You're being gracious in asking because it's
No,
so
i,
aligned
I
with
want to
everything
know
we
your
teach.
opinion.
Um, but it really comes down to, are you the person that understands the habits of the highly influential, right? Like one of the reasons I wrote my book is because so many people don't understand how influence works. And you just alluded to it a minute ago, right? It's getting that first follower is so difficult. Getting your first handful of followers, right? So never underestimate the importance of someone's first followers, right? There's a great Derek Sivers quote. He says, Never underestimate the value of the first follower. Until a leader has their first followers, they're just some nut waving their arms on a hill, right?
That's
And I
true.
love that quote. It's one of the most brilliant things that ever came out of Derek Sivers' mouth, right?
It's
But
so
it's
true.
so true, right? And so the answer is so obvious, so many of us don't even see it, right? And then when we see it, we're like, oh, that's so obvious, right? Which is, be other people's first follower. In other words, you can't make yourself influential, right? You can only give influence to other people and they can give it back to you. So when you become other people's raving fans, when you become the kind of person who shouts it from the rooftops, then there's a reciprocity that starts being created and other people naturally give energy back to you, right? I mean, one of the reasons
Wow.
I love your show so much, Ken, I mean, And it's kind of fun. Like I'm actually, I humbly say this, but I'm actually at the point where I can turn down interviews now because I get so many requests because I lead an organization whose members collectively reach over 500 million people, right? The
Yeah.
EBC has grown that big. So I can be really choosy. I would come on your show any day of the week because I so love everything you teach and love everything you stand for, right? And
Thank
so
you.
it's not about being inauthentic and like willy-nilly giving influence wherever. Like it's not about pandering to get it back. It's about choosing those people that you deeply love and admire, those people you really align with, that you think are brilliant, and giving influence where influence is due,
Yeah.
right? And just watching when you become the person who routinely does that, whether or not the person even has the capability of giving the influence back to you, just do it anyway. Like give influence to the barista who makes you the incredible latte at your favorite coffee shop. Tell her manager how awesome he or she is, right? And when you start to just do that routinely, give influence. You can tell I'm
Wow.
French Canadian. I talk with my hands. But when you do that routinely, the influence just starts coming back to you, right? And that's the foundation of all influence.
Class dismissed. Like that. I swear. Okay, so let's talk about. Oh God, my brain is going crazy with this right now. So let's talk about the because there is another movement that people think is influence, and it's absolutely not. And that's my professional and humble opinion. And that is these idiots out here renting private jets for an hour that never leaves the damn runway. Pardon my language,
Yes.
and they're taking pictures to post on Instagram. And I'm
Mhm.
like, that is not how you create influence, you moron. Like
Yeah.
that's what I
Well,
wanted.
and
Like,
that speaks to the lack of understanding of how influence and money and impact all play together, right?
yes.
Because, like, and we often talk about social proof, right? Like, if there's social proof, if you have a huge following, if you have a best-selling book, like
Yep.
like my credibility went through the roof once Mass Influence started staying on the bestseller list and out of the #1 spot in small business marketing for
Yeah.
years. Like
Yep.
the social proof of that is huge, right? But there's also monetary proof, and we all know this intuitively, right? Like when we see someone standing in front of a Lamborghini, we assume they must know what they're doing in business if they're a business owner, right?
Right. Right.
Or if we see a business owner that charges more, we automatically assume they must be smarter. They charge more. They must be in higher demand. They charge more, right? So social proof and monetary proof start to play together, right? But the reality is, monetary proof can be ephemeral, right? Like, because influence is really just, do people know, like, and trust you enough they'll take action based on your word? That's really all influence is. And so mass influences, do a lot of people know, like, and trust you enough to take
Right.
action based on their word, right? And so when we start looking at whether your influence is lasting, right, that's more based on your relationship capital and your intellectual capital than your monetary capital,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the influence you buy with money only lasts as long as the money's there, right? And so these
Say
people
that
who
one more
in
time for the
the
people in the
influence
back.
you buy with money only lasts as long as the money's there, right? So if you buy an advertisement, for example, as soon as the ad budget runs out, the influence from that ad budget is gone. Whereas if you build relationship with people and you build up relationship capital, this is a common term now being used in the industry, right? We
Yep.
have, intellectual capital, we also have relationship capital.
Yep.
And when you start to build that up, then your influence is more sustainable,
Yeah.
right? So it's not that these people aren't influential when they rent the private jet and blah blah blah, and they have a big fun, and their one video goes absolutely viral.
Yeah.
But there's no sustainability to that unless they keep renting the jet, right? So they have
Ah.
to keep throwing money at it, right? So
Oh.
it's far better to have the relationships built up and have the know, like, and trust built for the relationship to stay. Because a lot of people, it's really the distinction between influence and fame, right? Fame is just a lot of people know you. Influence is a lot of people know, like, and trust you. right? And so
Yeah.
it's important to start to see those distinctions, because just because a video goes viral and somebody hits 1.2 million people doesn't mean anybody's going to listen to them or take action based on what they're saying.
Okay, everybody watching this right now should share this out multiple times, because
Mm.
this is a master class. If you want to learn how to have a better life, and which, listen, I'm an influencer, and I can tell you that being an influencer creates a better life, period. Like, it
Yeah.
just does. And it gives you the ability to create a better life for other people, which in my opinion is why we're here. That's just my
Yeah.
opinion.
Well, it
So
was
so
Aristotle that first talked about that, you know?
yeah,
Aristotle talked about there's different types of happiness, right? He talked about hedonistic happiness, which is the pursuits of the flesh, like, and it's not inappropriate hedonistic happiness. It's like you rent a jet and you go have a outrageous fun for 2 hours, but
yeah,
as soon as the jet lands, your fun's gone, your happiness is gone, right?
yeah,
Whereas he also talked about eudaimonia, right? And eudanistic happiness is the deep happiness that settles into your cells because you know you're a really big contribution to your family, your community, to society at large. And the bigger the contribution you feel you are, the greater your happiness and the
yeah.
more sustainable it is. So if you're struggling with happiness, you know, take a stand for something, like learn from Ken, right?
Or
Because
Teresa.
when you become an influencer and actually start to say, no, I'm going to make my life about changing something in the world, about solving this problem. You know, the problem I made my life about was, how do you help change agents make their lives about solving problems, right? So, you know, very similar passion to you, Ken, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's when the really awesome happiness just settles into your being, right? Because you know you're helping people.
yep. Uh, I'm telling you, like, everybody on planet Earth needs to be watching this right now, and absorbing what you're saying, because it's so true, and you're delivering this message in a way that people should be able to, like, go, "Oh my God, the light bulb just came on for me in my life." So when you do you work with people like one on one to help them create more influence in life? How do you, what do you do?
Well, it starts with reading my book. Like, one of the reasons I wrote my book was that I wanted to help the everyday heroes, the everyday change agents, understand that influential people operate under a different set of habits. That's all it is, right? And like, it's kind of like we learn a set of rules in the sandbox, you know, like rules of fairness. I do this for you, you do this for me. We carry those into business when we first start networking, right? Like, you
Yeah,
want to build a relationship with a colleague, you have to offer to buy them a coffee. And then as soon as you phone up the head of a Fortune 500 company and offer to buy them lunch, faster than you can say gatekeeper, you learn the influential play by a whole different rule book. And if you don't know what that rule book is, you just don't understand how to step into that world. So my book is kind of like the mismanners of how to step into the world of influence. Like, what's the mindset and the different way of being, right? And so we created the book and the 30-day influence challenge, which is just like little 2-minute exercises you do every day that help you, you know, flex your influence muscle and understand, like, you get the paradigm shift just by doing the exercises, basically. And,
yeah,
you know, so we give those away for free on my book website. We also give the digital version of my book away for free right now because it's on its 7th anniversary of being on the bestseller list and out of the #1 spot in small business
that's
marketing.
awesome.
So,
Wow.
you know, do you mind if I shout out the website for that? It's just
Mass, yeah,
massinfluencethebook.com.
here, I want to share that right now. I already
Yeah.
have
And
it keyed up here.
so that, like, that's a good first step. Like, just understand how influence works, right? Like, start listening to every freaking one of Ken Wall's radio shows too. I'm a huge fan because
Oh, come
everything we
on.
teach
No,
is
you're
so
not.
aligned with everything I talk about in my book, right?
Oh my
And
gosh.
but it's like, just lean in, you know? One of the reasons I created the Evolutionary Business Council was so that we could have a community where we create masterminds and calls and events where people can get support and understand how to make connections with other colleagues who are also about changing the world and really becoming a force for change in the world. And it, you know, it really makes a difference when you feel like you're not alone.
I'm going to get back to Jackie's question here in a minute, but So I have people, how do I hate to come off sounding like I'm arrogant too. But like I have people reach out to me at least once a week, at least. Um,
Mhm.
hey, can I buy you lunch? And I'm like,
Right.
dude, I can afford my own lunch. What I can't afford is to meet you for lunch so you can pick my
Mm.
brain for free. And
Yeah.
and 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 I think that um and I've seen people get offended. I've heard people when I'm teaching, like, they get offended. Like, I reached out to
Yeah.
the CEO of PepsiCo and he was rude and declined my offer or would never call me back. And I was going to
Yeah.
buy him free lunch. Like,
Yeah.
what? You don't
Yeah.
think he can afford his own lunch? What the heck are you talking about? So
Yeah.
talk about some of that, because I do love this is my favorite topic. So
Yeah.
um, you know, I do love the fact that um, people are trying to figure out how to create more influence in their life, right?
Yeah.
Um, how do you, and I want your opinion, how do you get a hold of the CEO of PepsiCo and actually get him to let you go to lunch? And what's interesting is he'll probably be the one that buys lunch and refuse to
Yes.
allow you.
Yeah.
But how do you get on somebody's radar like that?
Yeah. It's, and I love that example you give. I talk about that in my book. I affectionately call that the premature ask, right? And,
Thank you.
yeah,
Ah,
premature what?
you just became my new best friend, by the way.
Yeah.
So
But
wow.
but it's true because influencers value their time differently. Like, if you look at extreme examples like Oprah Winfrey, like, an hour of Oprah Winfrey's time is not
Oh
worth your $7 latte that you're offering. Like, they're just not, right?
no.
And influencers have a lot of demands on their time. Generally, everybody wants a piece of you, right, when you're an influencer. And
Yep.
so it's important to understand that the way to approach an influencer is you use the currency that matters to influencers, which is influence. Right? So, like,
Amen.
you often see this mistake at networking events, right? Like, and at a networking event, usually the 2 most influential people in the room are the host and the guest speaker on stage. And you'll watch the guest speaker walk off, and there'll be a lineup of people there waiting to talk to the guest speaker. And half of them will have a product sample in hand or a book or a CD, and the other half will want to offer to buy them a coffee or lunch. And that's kind of like going to the new neighbor you just met and saying, "You're so going to love my kids. You're really going to enjoy babysitting them." Right? Like, and it might be true. You might have the greatest kids on the earth and they might have the best relationship with your neighbor, but it's way too soon to say something like that to someone
Oh,
you just met. Your book, your product sample, that lunch, that coffee is way more about you than it is about the influencer, right? So the way to approach them is to offer them influence, right? Hey, can I interview you on my show? By the way, if you don't have a show, that's why you want to follow Ken, right? Can I interview you on my show? Can I connect you with someone who's got a stage you can speak on? I heard you saying you're going to Detroit next month. I know some really influential people there. Can I connect you with them? You offer them some form of influence, then you get in the door. Then they want to have coffee with you because now you're speaking their language.
oh my God. I'm telling you, if people are that are not watching, I feel so sorry for you right now. Listen, I last night I had this, like, Glenn Morshower, very famous actor, one of my dearest friends in the world, was on my mastermind call last night with everybody, and Glenn often visits us, and he's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And we were having a form of this conversation in the mastermind. And he said, don't reach out to me and say, how can I serve you? Because he said, I don't need you to serve me. I'm good. I don't need you to serve me. Like, and
Yeah,
that's very, very common. Like, how can I, oh, Teresa, I just want to be in your presence. How can I serve you? And that puts
yeah,
you in a very awkward position. Like,
yeah,
I'm good. Like, I don't need you to serve me. I don't need you
yeah,
to buy me lunch. I got that. I can buy my own. I got a latte machine. I don't need you to buy me a star. I hate
yeah,
Starbucks. But
yeah,
so when you see
It's a
people,
mind shift in the right direction, though. Like, how can I serve you is better than can I buy you a coffee? Right?
okay,
So baby steps, right? But
I,
it's still
I,
kindergarten. Like,
it
how can
is,
I serve you is still kindergarten, right?
it
And
is,
so it's important to know if that's the question you're asking of highly influential people, you really don't understand their currency. Because, if they turn around and say, well, go help with the volunteer table at the back or whatever, to them, that's not the kind of contribution that you getting them on a podcast that reaches 20,000 people would be, or you helping them speak on a big stage in front of 500 people, right? So the more intentional and specific you get about it, it is way more
yeah,
effective, right? So it's not
yep,
wrong to say, how can I serve you? It's certainly better than saying, will you read my book and endorse my
uh,
book? But it's
yeah.
certainly not the level of mastery that we would stand for you getting, right?
And Ted Legal said that site isn't coming up. It actually is. I just tested it and it's working. So make sure you're typing that in. If somebody would type that in the comments for me, that would be great. That'll make it clickable directly from the comments. So wow, this is so powerful. And I think that I just want to give people real life examples of how they can create more, because again, it goes back to the saying that the 5 closest people to you will
Mm,
determine your net worth and your all of that, right?
mm,
So how does somebody go from, I can remember there was a time when I was making $500 a week, and I was like, I'm stuck here forever. I'm gonna make $24,000 a year for the rest of my life, and I hate
mm,
myself and my life and yada yada yada. That there was this ceiling, and I knew, I heard Brian Tracy, another great Canadian, who's been on the show, and I love the guy. But I heard these people in their recordings say, you got to get around the right people. You got to hang out with the right people. Well, you
mm.
can't just walk into, Donald Trump's office and say, hey, I want to start hanging out with you, or whoever it is, right? Like, you can't just go to a massive influencer and say, I want you to be my best friend. How do you suggest people go from a level where they are now that want to get to a higher level of influence? How would they do that? What's the first step that you would suggest in
Yeah,
real
well, the
life
first step
action?
is buy my book because
I
the
agree,
roadmap's in
thousand
there.
percent.
But,
Yes.
the digital version's for free, so you can read it on Kindle or Kobo or iBooks
Is
for
it
free. But
free?
yeah, we're as an anniversary special, we're giving the digital versions away for free. But,
Wow.
it really starts with declare what your life is about, right? Like, be a stand for changing or improving something in the world. Right. And like, so find something you're passionate about that you want to be the stand for that thing shifting or changing. Right. And then choose one channel of influence, whether it's Facebook, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram, choose one thing. Right. And then really pour energy into growing a following on that thing. But that following is not to promote you. That following is for you to help shine influence in all the other people in that conversation that you want to build relationship with. So like you're a walking, breathing example of this, Ken, right? Like
Yeah.
you epitomize what you teach because you interview awesome people on your show all the time. I love watching your reruns because there's some incredible people on your show, right?
Wow.
But you're using that to also build relationship with all these amazing people. And when you get in these deep relationships of reciprocity with all these other people in the same conversation with you, massive amounts of influence start coming back to you. And then you just have to learn to have it play with profit, right?
Yep.
Because a lot of us go into the world of influence philanthropically, like because we do want to stand for some change in the world. And then we have to realize, okay, it's not just social proof I need, it's also monetary proof. And I've got to figure out how to get those two things playing together. And, that's really just a journey you go on. You find the mentors you need and you start learning from them. That's one of the reasons we created the Evolutionary Business Council, right? Was to bring change agents together to get them the support that they needed.
God, first off, if you're watching the replay, make sure that you go back to the beginning again and start over and watch from this. This is so powerful because I think, and this is based on my humble opinion, I think that there's nothing more important for a person's life and success than to learn how to have influence. You can't do it alone. Dr. Wayne Dyer wrote in one of his books, who's my favorite spiritual author. He wrote that spirituality cannot exist in a vacuum, right? Well, I think it's true about spirituality, success, joy, happiness. It can't happen in a vacuum all on your own. Like
Yeah.
you need to be around other people influencing their lives as well.
Yeah, very much true for everything. Nothing in humanity happens in a vacuum, right?
No.
So it's the relationships, it's the who you surround yourself with. One of the reasons I created the Evolutionary Business Council was because I needed it.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily like one of the really beautiful things about our organization, because it's really been created by the members themselves, right? Because I needed to acknowledge that in many cases, I'm not the smartest person in the room. In many cases, I need my own breakthrough. Like leaders, and I love it that there's so much research coming out on this, but leaders really bump into their own negative self-talk a lot,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Especially when we start stepping into our own dreams of really making change and really creating legacy in the world, right? Because our dreams are bigger to us than they are to anyone else in the world, right? They're your dreams. That's freaking huge, right? And so
Yep.
there's nothing scarier to us than our own dreams. But there's no one who's going to be better hardwired and better capable of fulfilling on your dream of really making a difference in the world than you, because nobody else is going to be more committed. Nobody else is going to be more passionate and charismatic about it, right? So there's the great irony. And so we as leaders need to confront our own negative self-talk. We actually do a lot of exercises on this in the Evolutionary Business Council, because you can't be doubting yourself and in terror if you're wanting to lead a beautiful podcast reaching tens of thousands of people, or you can't be in terror if you want to sit in front of a group and lead them in group sessions, right? So you really need to confront what's going on between your ears in terms of your own consciousness before you can lead the world to a better way of being.
I cannot wait to read your book. I'm excited
Thank
about
you.
it. Hopefully I read it and feel like I could have written it.
I think you might. There's a lot of alignment in everything you do and everything you teach. So I love it. Yeah.
I'm teasing you. I love everything you're saying. So talk about this, what you're calling it, a business council. What's the business
Yeah.
council thing that you
The
keep talking
Evolutionary
about?
Business Council is really just a mastermind group for people who are interested in changing the world, right? And so our vision is a conscious, sustainable world. And so we're there to support businesses that are in alignment with creating a more conscious, more sustainable world, right? And so our goal is that we either support influencers, or if you come to us and you're not an influencer, we encourage you to become one, because we believe
Yeah.
education and education marketing is the most powerful tool we have on the planet right now. Not my term, by the way. Education marketing was coined by Justin Livingston. And, so we really stand for education marketing as a way of pushing out new ideas and new ways of thinking. So we have trainings, we have masterminds, we have live informal meetings, and our members just become really good friends with each other, right? So can you imagine when you're trying to launch something, if you just have an army of amazing people at your back who all happen to understand influence and all happen to be influential, the
Yeah.
power that you can put to that that initiative, that movement, right? I'm trying to get away from saying the word epidemic. If you wonder why I'm struggling, it's so built
No,
into
I
our
don't like
marketing language. And I'm like, we need to replace that word because it's just not got the best connotation anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Um, you know, I truly think that first off, everybody watching needs to get your book. it's free. The digital version is free. So there, we eliminated all of your excuses with that. And I think somebody said the paperback's only like $8. So um that's what it would cost you to buy a latte for that CEO that you want to meet. So
Yeah.
just get the book and read it and study it and follow Teresa everywhere. So let me ask this, and I normally save this for the end. We're God, we've already been on here 43 minutes. That's impossible. No, 40 minutes. So I'd like to ask this question. In your opinion, what do you think keeps people from experiencing or creating real financial success and freedom and happiness? And I do think those two things are related. You've probably heard me
Mhm.
say that before. I
Yeah.
think they're related. I've been homeless and broke, and I've been very wealthy, and very wealthy is way better. So it just
Yeah.
is. There's no other way to say it. So what do you think keeps people from creating everything they want in life? And you can't say fear, because that's the number one answer, and I don't think it's fear.
Uncategorically, I would say it's our negative self-talk.
Thank you.
And
Jeez.
it's amazing all the research coming out on this now, right? Like research is now showing that as human beings, we create our biggest self-limiting beliefs around the age of 2 when
Mm,
we're first learning language. So our very first failures in our life, we start to say things to ourselves that make those failures make sense to us as a 2-year-old, right? And then those negative beliefs start to stick and we start living into those. Like most human beings start doing one of two things, right? They either desperately trying to prove it's not true, or they desperately try and prove it, or they're desperately terrified that it is, right? And so they shy away from situations that would bring them into that fear, right? And everybody's
mm,
got a different version of that. And whatever your version of those self limiting beliefs are going to dictate the things that are most scary to you in life. Right. And so it's interesting because we see it a lot in the Evolutionary Business Council. We have people come in who are awesome at money and profit, and they struggle on the influence side. And we have people come in that are awesome on the influence side, and they can't figure out how to make it profitable.
yeah.
Right. And it's they're bumping into their own beliefs, their own negative self talk. Right. We do a ton of inner child work in the ABC, right? Myself included, right? Because I can actually remember the day I created some of my most self limiting beliefs, right? I
Yep.
got to do my work too to be someone who can lead the ABC. And so, inner child work is a great way to get back to what are those early beliefs that have now become the lens through which we live our lives that may be stopping us all over the place and we don't even see it because it's so imbued in the way we think. It's ingrained in our cellular structure.
Eckhart Tolle talks about in The Power of Now, the
Mhm,
colors when you have the shift, when it occurs, because
mhm,
it occurs because you're seeking it. It does. It just sometimes doesn't occur as fast as you want it to. But
yeah,
colors become brighter. The air smells different. Everything, your senses all become much, much more acute when you have that shift.
yeah, yeah, very
It's
much so.
it's incredible. So you were saying my wife put up wow 2 years old. Um,
Yeah.
so you're saying it's the negative self-talk. I don't disagree in any way. I think you're 1,000% correct.
Mhm.
Joe Dispenza talks about that, right?
Yeah,
And
loads of people in our industry talk about it, right?
yeah.
It's everywhere these days. Yeah.
So if somebody is walking around, and I talk about this all the time,
Mhm,
I'm always saying, dude, you're struggling because you're telling yourself you're struggling. You're sick because you keep saying, I'm sick, I'm sick, I have a
mhm,
cold, I have
mhm,
a fever, I have this, blah, 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 blah. You've got to change that inner voice. How
mhm.
do you suggest people change the self-talk they're having?
Yeah. Well, one of the exercises we love to do in the Evolutionary Business Council is give your inner child a new job description. right? And that's
Mm,
actually a convergence between my work and Jennifer Huff's work, because she does a lot of work on Give Your Ego a New Job Description. And so I have, we have her permission to embed that in our work because she's a prominent member of the EBC, right?
wow.
And it really comes down to that 2-year-old version of you, whatever you created as your biggest self-limiting beliefs. Like, I created, I'm too small to play with the big kids because I'm the youngest of a really big family, right? And
Mm,
I was often devastated at being left behind or left out of things because I was so little, right? But you'll have some version of that. I'm not lovable. I'm too short. I'm too tall. I'm not athletic. I'm not smart. I'm too white. I'm too black. There could be a dozen things, and there's usually one or two that are dominant for you, right? And so your little inner child, aka your ego that you developed at a very young age,
yep.
is often ringing that alarm bell whenever you hit a situation that triggers that belief, right? And and so when you think about it, if your little inner child that was invented at the age of 2 is ringing the alarm bell all the time, you've got a 2-year-old driving the bus, right? And
Wow.
there's people in our industry that would say, "Oh, you got to kill off your ego. You got to become egoless." And I think, "Ooh, that's a cruel thing to do to your inner child." Like,
Thank
your inner
you.
child is a beautiful part of you. Your ego is a beautiful part of you. You just don't want it making the decisions in your life, right? Because your personality, your ego, a lot of it stems from who you created yourself to be at a very young age. You want your higher consciousness and your intuition and your higher faculties to be the decision maker, right? So we do an exercise called Give Your Inner Child a New Job Description. Your inner child's no longer allowed to be the one that rings the alarm bell. I call my inner child Tessie because that was one of my favorite nicknames as a child, right? So Tessie's in charge of fun, and Tessie's in charge of cheering me on whenever I start to get nervous or think maybe I can't do something. She's there to like say, "You can do it, Teresa," you know. But she's not there to ring the alarm bell. I do self-comforting work with my little inner child to say, "It's okay. I'm an adult now. I've got all these years of university and industry experience and all this stuff. I've spoken on hundreds of stages. I got this. So little Tessie, you're fine. You don't need to be scared right now. If you don't have to be here, or if you want to be here, you remind me to smile and have fun." Right? And so I let Tessie be part of it, but she's not running it. And when you can make that mental
Yeah.
shift, suddenly everything gets easier, and nothing seems insurmountable because now you've got the best cheerleader you could ever have, your own little inner child.
That's brilliant. I
Mm.
I think, I hear people say, "Oh, you gotta let go of your ego. Ego is edging God out." It's an acronym, and I don't disagree with some of that, but completely, but other parts I do. I remember I'll have 20 years of sobriety, and if I make it to August, and by the grace of
Um,
God and a lot of hard work, but
Congratulations.
thank you. But I can remember, like, for many, 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 many years, I thought, I tried over and over and over. And my ego is what saved my life. And I'm gonna
Yes.
tell you why. Somebody
Yeah.
called me, said, "Everybody around here knows you're nothing more than a worthless drunk." And my
Yeah.
ego was so injured from that statement that I
Mhm.
finally surrendered and went and got help. And
Yeah.
so the ego's not, I so agree with you. It's the
Mhm.
ego is not something that we need to get rid of. It's something that we
Yep.
need to embrace and figure it out, learn what it is.
Yeah, yeah. I think whatever you call your spiritual connection, God, the universe,
Yeah.
source, you were given an ego by that higher consciousness,
Yep.
if you want to look at it that way. Why would the universe create something that wasn't in your service? Right? But it's a matter of learning how to master your inner child and your ego so that it's there serving your higher purpose, not preventing you from doing it, right? Because,
Amen.
like, would you want a bunch of people walking around with no personalities? Like,
No,
that would be a pretty freaking dull world to live in, right? And our personalities stem from our ego, right?
that's right.
So like, I think our egos are really a beautiful, colorful, they're like They're like what makes the masterpiece of the painting that is your life, right? But they're just not what should be making the decisions of what's in the highest interest. That should be your higher consciousness doing that, right? And so, I love how you put that. Like sometimes your ego is your best friend. You want to harness that, right?
Yes.
Harness the parts of your ego that drive you forward. With me having I'm too small to play with the big kids is a dominant um, limiting belief. It was also my dominant motivator. Like, go figure that I would eventually become a global expert on influence because importance became an important conversation to me at the age of 2.
Right.
You know?
I that it's the 2-year-old that's making you go, "I need attention."
Yeah,
Like, right?
yeah,
I think that, I look at I just had a thought about something and it's gone now. This is absolutely amazing. Everybody go to Mass Influence the book, and how do they get the digital version for free when they get there?
all the links are right there on the webpage. The
Oh,
30-day influence challenge and all the links are all on that one page.
oh, you
So,
have a free 30-day influence challenge.
yep, all of our complimentary resources are all on massinfluencethebook.com. So,
That's
just
so
go there and
awesome.
we will hook you up. Yeah.
So when the pandemic occurred,
Mm,
um, I know that suicide rates skyrocketed globally, not
mhm,
just in the US, but all over the world. And I, which breaks my heart. Um, there are people that may be watching this or listening to the replay, that maybe they've tried everything. They just can't figure it out. They feel like they've given it everything they have, and they just can't figure out what to do next. For
mhm.
the person that's hanging on by a thread, what do you say to them if they called you and said, "I've tried everything. I don't know what to do next, and I'm just struggling, and my electric's getting shut off, my car's getting repoed, whatever."
Yeah.
Um, what do you say to them to help them to get over that hump, to get to the
Mm.
next moment where you and I know it's gonna get better, but
Yeah. Yeah.
people jump. They don't wait on it to
Yeah.
get better.
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges we can ever face is getting on top of our own thoughts, right? And I love the work of Abraham Hicks here. I
Mm,
think everything she teaches is just brilliant on this. She talks about emotional vibrational scale and
yeah.
just brilliant, brilliant stuff. But I would say if you can do one thing and one thing only, notice whether your thoughts are inward facing or outward facing. In other words, if ever your thinking is all about you, my life sucks. I need to pay the rent. My back hurts. I can't sleep. All of those are inward facing thoughts. They're all about you. And it's very difficult to build relationship, to build connection, to build possibility in your life when all of your thoughts are inward facing. Now, I'm not saying don't worry about yourself. I'm not saying that. You got to pay the rent. You got to think about that stuff. But if that's the dominance of your thought, then you're shutting down your ability to build the relationships you need that are actually going to turn your life around. So if you can cleave out some part of your day, even if
Mm.
instead of sitting home at night worrying, you go out and just walk around your neighborhood and think, how can I be of service to others? How can I be of service to others? Oh, here's someone coming along. I'm just going to smile and wish them a good evening. That's all I'm going to try for tonight. I'm going to smile and wish them a good evening, but I'm going to give energy to someone else and make it about them for 2 seconds and then find another opportunity. How do I make it about them instead of me? How do I focus my thoughts outward instead of inward? And when you start to get into the habit that the dominance of your thoughts are focusing outward and not inward, you can't stay depressed if you're focused outward because depression is an inward facing emotion. You have to be focused on yourself. So the more you can focus your thoughts on what can I do for others? How can I do for others? Where do I want to get to? What do I want to focus on? Where do I want to get to? Who do I want to help? And even if you can cleave out a few minutes of your day, every day doing it, and then notice how you feel when you're doing it. Notice if things are getting better for you when you're doing it, and do more of what makes you feel better. Then keep moving down that path and see where your intuition takes you. You may be surprised. Within 2 weeks, your life may be looking radically differently if you just pursue that one exercise as much as you possibly can.
Uh, I feel like I'm interviewing the female version of myself. Like I talk about, like I've said, like, hey, if you're depressed, go find a neighbor and weed their flower garden. Like pull the weeds out of somebody else's garden and watch the weeds disappear from your own. I think, wow, that's tweetable. I just made that up. That's pretty good.
It's
But
brilliant.
but it's true. I mean, there's nothing more true in the world. Like if your life sucks and you're depressed about it, go help somebody else.
Yeah.
And it's so counterintuitive, isn't it? Like
It
it's
really
like
is.
it's the opposite of what your ego really wants. Like I know I want everybody to pay attention to me and feel
Yeah.
sorry for me, and
Yeah.
but that's not the way that you get out of it.
Yeah. Ironically, the way to get other people to pay attention to you is to care about them,
Yes.
right? And so when we start focusing our thoughts and our actions outward, way more people start caring about you. It's the great irony. It's the exact opposite of what our ego and that little inner child, that negative self-talk would have us think is the appropriate response, right? And so if we're getting mired in that negative thinking, again, you're letting the 2-year-old run the show. You're letting the
Amen.
2-year-old, the little inner child run the show, and the little inner child is needy, so the inner child is desperate and screaming to have its needs met, instead of letting the adult run the show and say, "Okay, let me focus outward. How can I focus outward? What can I do in this next 10 minutes that would have me focus outward?"
Wow. Teresa, I've been wondering who my stalker was in Costa Rica from looking at my analytics. I'm kidding. I'm honestly I'm blown
Guilty.
away. I
Yeah.
no, he's like, I'm blown away. I'm honored and humbled that you watch my show. I didn't know that, and I'm
Mm.
very, very
Mm.
humbled by that. Thank you.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
it's just a great show, Ken. People should watch more of it. I'd love to see more shows like you out in the world. It's Thank you for
um
what you're doing for the world. Thank you.
thank you. My gosh, you're making a massive impact. I
Mm.
really hope everybody here. My wife is making global travel plans for us during
Jill,
the
we gotta
show.
get you and Ken down to Costa Rica. I'm at the retreat center right now, so yeah, come on down and
Oh,
visit us.
let's do it. Yeah, I'm in. As long as we can go to Machu Picchu while we're there. Uh,
Well, that's Mexico, but you can hop across pretty
it's
easily.
not. That's not in Costa Rica.
Yeah. Oh, no, sorry, Machu Picchu is Peru, yeah, so,
Peru.
yeah, yeah.
I do that all the time.
We have
Uh,
our own amazing places to see though, so yeah, Costa
I'm
Rica's got
sure.
loads of incredible
Yeah.
things, yeah.
Well, Teresa, first off, everybody go to Mass Influence the book and download the free copy, buy the other copy. There's a way, by the way, if you want more influence in your life, buy influencers stuff. Like pay for it. Like invest in yourself, and you're investing in a relationship with them. That doesn't mean that if you buy their book, you're going to be able to buy them lunch. But but it's a start. And then leaving nice, comments about the book and sharing their stuff out. So where can everybody follow you? Where's the best place to follow you on social media?
Actually, if you come to that website, we have all my social media links on there too, so you can find them all.
There
Um,
you go.
yeah, so, yeah, I've just come play with us, and if you wanna check out the Evolutionary Business Council, that's easy too, ebcouncil.com. And, yeah, like, life is just so much juicier when you give yourself permission to take action on your dreams of really making a difference in the world. And I promise you, if you're depressed or struggling, taking action on something that will help you be a deep contribution to others, nothing will bust you out of your depression quicker than figuring out a way to be a bigger contribution to the world, you know?
I mean, I don't know how many times I've said amen today, but I think it's been a record number of times. You're so
Mm,
right. You're so, so, so right. And I'll so I was in this meeting one time and I saw this guy with 40 years of sobriety talking, and
wow.
and I was like, that's longer than God's been sober. And I'm like, in my mind, I was brand new. He said, if you want the secret to happiness in life and long-term sobriety, it's in the bottom of the coffee pots in this room. And I was like, what the heck is he talking about? He said, show up early, make the coffee, set up the chairs, and at the end of the meeting, stick around, grab the coffee pots and go clean them and wipe out the bottom really, really good. Make sure it's nice and clean and ready for the next meeting. And
Yeah,
and so I'm like, I don't know what the hell he's talking about, but I'm gonna do that. And it's so true. The secret to life is in the bottom of the coffee pot. It's serving
yeah,
other people. That's the secret
yeah,
to influence.
yes. It's really the secret to everything, you know? It really is, when we make our life now, when I say make your life about service to others, don't hear philanthropically with no monetary return back to you,
Right.
okay? But start wherever you can start.
Yeah.
Because when you make your life about service to others, then maybe the job offer is going to come. Maybe the business idea is going to come. There should be money flowing back toward you. It's kind of like breathing. You got to breathe out and then you can breathe in, right? And there's a reciprocity to that. But if you're only ever doing one and not the other, you're going to suffocate to death, right? And so there needs to be this reciprocity created in your life. And when your thoughts are only inward thinking, and it's appropriate that your thoughts are inward thinking some of the time.
Yes.
But depression is when we get a dominance of inward thinking thoughts, and then that doesn't work. It's like only ever breathing in and you never breathe out. You run out of air pretty fast.
Wow.
Mm.
Unbelievable. This has been one of my favorite interviews of all time. And I've
Oh,
interviewed 450 people. This is
wow.
unbelievable. For real. This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Um, Jackie wants, oh, can we talk about the phenomenon of how much money they make? We can quickly touch on that.
Yeah.
Money follows attention. You get attention by giving attention. That's my summation of it. You
Yes.
go ahead.
Yeah. Like one of the reasons we created the 3 pillars in the Evolutionary Business Council is you get a lot of people who are up to creating change in the world and they make it their mission in life and then they have trouble charging for their mission, right? And here's the breakthrough I think most people need, Jackie, that insight does not cause people to have breakthroughs in their lives, right? If insight was all we needed, there'd be no smokers, there'd be no obesity on this planet. Like we all know what it takes to lose weight, right? Like you exercise more, you eat less, right? So insight won't get people there. It's the point at which they take action, right?
Yep.
And in the EBC, we talk about that as the distinction of mobilization, right? When you can mobilize people, you change their lives. And ironically, there is no more mobilizing act than someone taking out their credit card and committing to sign up for a more advanced program or buy a more advanced product or whatever it is, right? The
Yeah.
credit card is the point of commitment and action. Isn't that interesting? And a lot of people make, ooh, as soon as I start selling, there's a negative energy there. That's your inner child. That's your ego talking. I
Yep.
can't possibly bring money in. They'll think I'm self-serving. Or, there's a whole pile of inner dialogue we get into, right? So when you start to see that money is a part of causing change in the world, like one of my favorite examples is Mother Teresa. She was a highly successful businesswoman. She
Yep.
raised hundreds of millions of dollars for her not-for-profit business,
Yep.
right? And did a massive good in the world with that amount of money.
Massive.
And she never once apologized for taking money, regardless of where the money came from. Her
No.
favorite saying was, all money is washed clean in the service of God,
Yep.
right? And she was unashamed at the amount of money she made, right? And so influencers can make massive amounts of money, Jackie. I'm so glad you asked that question, right? As they should, because if they're out to create change in the world, they're going to spend that money on other awesome things that create even more change in the world.
Yeah.
Right? We took a lot of the money we were making from the Evolutionary Business Council, and a group of us came down here to Costa Rica to create an intentional community down here, which stands for a better way of living. It's kind of like a passion project we're doing down here. But one of our goals is to turn around the economy of a very depressed and challenged area of Costa Rica, like where people just don't make a lot of money. They don't know how to bring in new business. If
Yeah.
we bring in retreats and other people to this region, that'll transform this whole surrounding area around us, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So people who are out to create change, philanthropists, including in business, wanting to make a lot of money can be simply wanting to just have a more powerful tool in the force of creating change. So some of them can and do and should make massive amounts of money and use that money for even more good in the world.
And there are people who have a negative outlook on money. They have a negative relationship with money. And so they may see influencers. I'm not sure what Jackie's talking about here. They don't talk about it on their lives. Makeup artists. Facebook told her 10 extra hours for $500. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
Facebook pays me for one or two of my pages. They pay me for the amount of live time I do or whatever. But I don't think that a real influencer focuses on that. I don't. I mean, they paid me like $100 last month or something. I don't know. It wasn't.
Yeah, Jackie, the money that social media platforms pay you is like the cherry on top of the cake, right? The
Yeah.
real money in this industry is when you have a bunch of other influencers all willing to talk about whatever you're up to.
Right.
If you can sell an advanced program or advanced content
Yeah.
or upsell to an even better product that's really going to change people's lives and have a better impact on their lives,
Yeah.
and you've got 200 influencers that all can reach 100,000 people each, and
Yeah.
suddenly what you're doing is in front of that many people, the money you make on your social media platform is chump change. It really is.
Yep.
Right? So
It is.
there is massive amounts of money to be made by learning the realm of influence and how to have it play effectively with profit.
Yep.
What social media platforms pay you for ad revenue is simply based on how many followers you have, how many ads feed.
Yep.
But you're right, that can amount to 500, 1,000, 3,000, $10,000 a month, depending on how big your following is.
I
But
have.
that's a drop in the bucket as to what's possible when you
Yes.
start connecting yourself with other influencers.
Yep.
Host an advanced retreat on something down here in Costa Rica and charge
$20,000.
$10,000 a person to come
Yeah.
for a week-long retreat, and you'll
Yeah.
see that the money you can make on social media is pretty small relative to the other breakthroughs you can help people with.
That's right. And again, I've watched Grant Cardone,
Mm.
generate. I don't even know how much, over $1 billion, I think, in
Yeah.
money that he's brought in from people investing in real estate opportunities. So, I just think, first off, there's not a thing in the world wrong with making money, period. I'll leave it there. Whether you're an influencer or you're a server in a restaurant or a janitor or whatever it is,
Mhm.
make money. My God, you cannot change your life or the world if you're broke. Like, you
Yeah.
can't. You cannot have an impact in a
Put on
positive
your own
way if you're
oxygen mask
broke.
first. Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
So listen, we're over time. I appreciate you coming on, Teresa. I'm blown away that you're such a fan of the show. That blows my mind. I'm
Mm.
so grateful to hear you say that. And I gotta say that um your energy, what you're teaching is absolutely phenomenal. Everybody here, go to massinfluencethebook.com. Download the digital copy. It's free. Get the paper book copy. I don't even know how much it is, but buy it. Doesn't even matter. And make sure you're following Teresa everywhere. Everywhere. Teresa, thank you so much. I appreciate you. You're amazing.
Thank you, Ken. I so appreciate you having me on the show. It was just a joy to be here today.
You're amazing. Everybody go follow Teresa, and we will see you later. Teresa, thank you again so much. I appreciate you.